All right, Mr. Ahmed here for 2.3. This video is going to be pretty short and sweet. 2.3 talks about some postulates and diagrams. These postulates, like we have stated, are very straightforward, but some important things to keep in mind. So the first one, 2.1, we call this the 2-point postulate, and essentially we say through any 2 points, there exists a line. So through any 2 points, A and B, there is exactly one line through them, and it has to contain at least those 2 points and all the infinite points that are on it. So any 2 points, no matter where they are, what plane, doesn't matter. There's always a straight line between 2 spots. Line point postulate states that a line contains at least 2 points, so pretty straightforward. Line intersections states that if we have 2 lines, then they intersect at exactly 1 point. Not every line does intersect. We could have parallel lines in the same plane. We could also have skew lines, which we'll talk about later, that are in different planes. But if any 2 lines intersect, they intersect at exactly 1 point. The next one talks about planes. For any 3 points, there exists a plane, no matter where they are. So even in a diagram, if I see points D, E, F, and maybe a point all the way down here, such as, I don't know, X, through any of these 3 points, there could be a plane. So if you're ever asked a question, are points A, B, and C coplanar? The answer is yes. Doesn't matter. A, B, and C are 3 points, so there is a plane that exists for those 3 points. A plane has to have at least 3 points as well. All right. Next, we're going to talk about the plane line postulate. If 2 points lie in a plane, then the line containing them also lies in the plane. So in this case, D and E are in the plane, so the line that goes through them would also be in that plane. And finally, if 2 planes intersect, then their intersection is a line. So the planes keep going, that line keeps going. This is the line where our 2 planes intersect, right there in purple. All right, so we're going to have a couple quick questions that just say state the postulate illustrated by the diagram. I'm actually going to write it out. If 2 lines intersect, then that intersection is a point. That's what we see going on by the diagram. And the second would be if 2 planes intersect, then that intersection is a line. So if 2 planes intersect, then the intersection is a line. And finally, a couple things that we can interpret from a diagram and can't interpret from a diagram. I can assume that if we see a whole bunch of points listed out, that they're in the same plane. All right, so even if there's not a plane drawn, if I just have a diagram down here with a whole bunch of points, I would assume that all those points are in the same plane, even though there's not a plane drawn. So all those would be coplanar. A couple other things we can assume is we can assume that a line is a line. Therefore, these 2 angles, AHB and BHJ, these 2 angles, angle 1, let's go over here. Let's call this angle 2. So let's call it AHB and AHF. Those 2 angles have to be a linear pair. They would add up to 180 because if it looks like a line, we assume it's a line. Vertical angles, we can also assume that those are going to be there. So in this case, angle 3 and 4, I'm going to name over here. Those 2 angles are vertical angles, so they will end up being congruent. If you see points on a line, you can assume that they are on a line. And in this case, that'd be like AHJD. All those would be collinear. And when you see things intersect, you can assume that that intersection is a point. So these 2 lines intersect at point H. These 2 lines intersect at point J. Some things we cannot assume. We cannot assume that any 3 points, G, F, E, even though those look like they're in a straight line, I cannot assume that because there's not a line drawn through them. I also cannot assume that these 2 lines will intersect. It's unsure. They could be parallel. They could intersect. We don't really know. They are not marked. And The last thing that we'd like to talk about is we cannot assume that angles are right angles unless they're marked with a box, and nor can we assume that angles are congruent unless they are marked with a tick mark. So those are some things we can and can't assume. Make sure you kind of familiarize yourself with that, and that's all we got. Have a good one.